I'm going to show you how to make $1,500 each and every week. These are weekly numbers, mind you. This is not monthly numbers, but 1,500 each and every week right out of your personal car. This won't require any sort of special equipment or anything like that. But I want to show you how to do that. And I'll just go ahead and tell you now, this is not Amazon Flex. This is not Uber. This is not DoorDash. This is not a lot of the things that you might expect me to talk about. This is something different. In fact, it's real simple. I broke it down into 3 steps. So I kind of gave you there the heads up, but we're talking about medical courier. I'm going to show you the 3 steps how you can become a medical courier and make up to $1,500 a week right out of your personal car. All right. So what's going on, money makers? This is Alton Arrell, your favorite side hustle guy. And like I said, in this video, I want to give you some really good information. I'm going to try to keep this information or keep this video brief. You guys are giving me your feedback. You always tell me, hey, just give me the meat and potatoes. So I'm going to get right into it. We're going to go over 3 steps, how you can make money as a medical courier right in front of your car. We're going to get right into it and everything you need. So first, before we even get into the steps, I always like getting into what is it to be a medical courier? Like, what is it? I don't want to assume that you know what it is. I didn't know. I can remember the conversation I had with a buddy of mine. He was doing it, crushing it, making a ton of money. And he told me what he was doing. He said, hey, I'm a medical courier. This was back during COVID. And I had zero idea what a medical courier was. I kind of had heard what a courier was, but even just the simple term of courier, I wasn't quite clear on what it is. So I don't want to assume that you know what it is. So let's talk about it real quick. Let's talk about what you'll do as a medical courier. And this is what I do. This is what some of my drivers do, because I've scaled my business up to the point where I subcontract this stuff out and I've got drivers. So this is what you do. Is literally just driving, taking things from point A to point B, and they just happen to be medical items. So what kind of medical items? You'll do supplies, lab specimens. And by lab specimens, I mean, you know, you've ever given blood, you go to a clinic, you give blood. Well, a lot of these clinics, they're smaller and they don't have a way to test that specimen internally, right? They don't have an internal lab. So what do? They have to send it out to like a specialized lab, or they have to send it out to some of the labs that you've heard, some of the national chains, right? They have to send it out, but who picks it up? People like you, people like me, people that they've outsourced to use their own vehicle. And again, this is right out of your personal vehicle. This is not something you have to have a Sprinter van, cargo van, anything like that with business signage on the side. You don't have to have that. That's right in your personal car that I'm talking about. So they subcontract this stuff out to people like you and me to pick these things up. And of course they pay us. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing it for free, right? They pay us to do this, to deliver these things from point A to point B. So again, it's going to be lab specimens. Prescription drugs are really huge right now, really huge. Companies like MedZoomer, SDSRX, we'll talk about some of these companies, but these companies they specialize in medical prescriptions, right? So your aunt or your grandma goes to a doctor's visit, he prescribes her something. It used to be you have to go up to the pharmacy and you'd have to wait in line. Well, that's changing. That's changing now. You'll have an option to have those prescriptions delivered right to your front door. And again, who does this? Who picks this stuff up? People like you and people like me, where they've outsourced this stuff. So they pay us really well to do that. So again, it's prescription drugs, lab specimens, supplies. I've done supplies, raw supplies. So a lot of these companies, they need supplies on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. So who delivers it? Again, people like you and people like me. These warehouses will outsource this stuff, people like you and me, to deliver this stuff right in their car. So organs, I've done organs before, right? Where somebody's getting maybe some sort of life-saving procedure done, and you go into a controlled space like an airport or something like that. You pick up this organ and you deliver it. So you do that sort of thing, but anything. So I think you get the point. It's delivering from point A to point B, anything medical. Again, a whole host of different things, right? And point A and point B could be a skilled nursing facility. It could be a nursing home. It could be a dental office. It could be an emergency department, any sort of medical facility, personal homes. You know, we talked about the prescriptions. So you're delivering things to folks' personal homes. So that's what it is, a medical courier. You get that, you understand that. Hopefully I did a good job of explaining that. But that's what it is, delivering things from point A to point B, and it just so happens to be specialized into the medical field, okay? So that's what we're talking about. Okay, so let's get into the steps. I didn't write them down because I didn't want to give it away. But let's get into the first step. The first thing you're going to need to do is what I call discovery, right? I call that discovery, and I'll explain that in just a second. So discovery. is the first thing we need to do, right? So I'll explain. What do I mean by discovery? This is this is not an action step, right? This is not something you need to do, but naturally the first thing you need to do is figure out if this is something you can even do. Are you eligible to do it? Do you qualify to do this? So I'm going to talk about that in this first step. So who can do this? Let's talk about who can do this. There's not a lot of criteria. Most of these companies are the same that you work with and get these routes and these deliveries. They just want you to be 18. They want you to have an active license, and they want you to have a registered vehicle. Okay, just 18, active license, and a registered vehicle. If you have those things, you can absolutely do this. Okay, you can absolutely do this. Now, there's a few caveats we'll talk about in this discovery phase. Let's talk about the vehicle first. Noticed earlier I said the vehicle type doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what type of vehicle you have. You don't have to have specialized equipment, right? Here's one thing that these companies do require, though. They require that they put an age restriction on the vehicle. And what I found in doing this for 5 years is that most companies will require that you have a 2010 or newer vehicle, okay? So you got to have a 2010 or newer vehicle. And let's talk about that for a second. This is how these companies ensure that their stuff is going to get to the place that it needs to be on time, right? So the last thing they want is for somebody to have an older vehicle. They're going to increase the chances that there's going to be breakdowns. So they put an age requirement on the truck, because just think of this is lab specimens. Like I told you before, somebody might need a biopsy that needs to be tested, right? So they need to make sure that this stuff increase the likelihood that it's going to get there on time, and it's not going to be broken. You're not going to be broken down on the side of the road. So that's kind of how they ensure that. They put an age requirement on the vehicle. So you have to have at least a 2010 or newer vehicle. Some companies, just a few, might let you do it a little bit older, but in general, just speaking in general terms, you're going to have a 2010 or newer vehicle. Okay. So again, the other thing that comes up when we talk about this, you have to be 18, active license, and a registered vehicle. Question I get a lot is, do they do background checks? What about my background check? Right? I've had an accident, I had a ticket, or I've had a DUI, or had a DWI. Is that going to impact me? And the answer is, it might. I'll tell you, after doing this for 5 years or so, the things that I see that impact people is just 3 things, sort of 2 things, 2.5. If you have a DUI or a DWI, if you had any of those in the last 7 years, that's probably going to be a tough hurdle to overcome. If you've had a DUI or DWI in the last 7 years, that's probably going to be tough for you to get into this, because for obvious reasons, they want to make sure that we're safe on the road. And that's one of the ways that they do that, unfortunately. The other thing is that they're looking for, so that's the MVR side. So they do an MVR check as a background check. Then they also do a criminal background check. They do a criminal background check. So if you've had felonies, and that's really the only thing that I've seen stop folks on the criminal background side. If you had a felony within the last 7 years, it's going to be relatively tough to overcome, to do this. Now, obviously, once you wait to a certain point and you say, hey, I had a felony conviction that was 15 years ago, then I don't think that impacts you based on what I've seen. Okay. All right. So that's really all we talk about in the first step when we talk about discovery. Are you eligible to do this? Okay. 18, active license, registered vehicle. And we talked about some of the hurdles that will prevent you from doing this. So let's move on to step 2 as we move along. Step 2. Now this, I told you step 1, the discovery step wasn't necessarily a action step. It's not an action step. This is just, again, discovery. Can you do this? Number 2 is absolutely an action step. Okay. And I'll write that down. It's absolutely an action step. So this is the first step where you can actually, there's something you need to do, right? And this is what you need to do. You need to get your certifications, okay? Get your certifications. And let's talk about that for a second. Certifications. Well, what certifications can you get? Now, keep in mind, when we talk about these certifications, these are by no means the only certifications that you can get. There's a whole host of certifications that you can get that will help you in your medical courier journey. But let's talk about the ones that are most common right out of the gate that these companies are going to require. It's your HIPAA and your bloodborne pathogen certification, okay? Your HIPAA and your bloodborne pathogen certification. Now, the HIPAA, you might be familiar with that term. If you've done anything in the medical field, you've heard of HIPAA laws. And what it is it's just really about privacy and protection of personal and private information, okay? Protection of personal and private information. So these companies that we contract with, they want to know that you've had at least some sort of exposure to how to protect people's private information, because I'll tell you, I have access to. Sometimes I'm just, you kind of step back and say, "Gosh, I've got access to a lot of information." So you have to know how to safeguard it. I mean, last four of socials, people's member ID numbers for their health insurance, private address, their personal addresses, their diagnosis. You'll have access to people's diagnosis. Maybe they were diagnosed with this or that. You may come across somebody that you've even known. So these companies want to know that you know how to safeguard and protect that information. The second certification, I told you there were two certifications. The second certification is going to be your bloodborne pathogens certification. Okay. Your bloodborne pathogens certification. Now, this certification, and both of these are really, really easy certifications to get, super easy. I can remember when I was first taking mine. I mean, it took me all of 45 minutes to knock out both. Super, super simple. Because I know a lot of times people, you might think, oh, this is in the medical space. These certifications are hard to get. It's maybe I have to study for it. I need study guides. It's truly a super simple certification process where you watch some slides on your phone. Most of these apps, you could do it on your phone. You could do it on your desktop, and then you're done. You take a little easy quiz, and you're done. Super simple. But the second one is your bloodborne pathogen certification. Okay, bloodborne pathogen. Now, this one is going to get you exposed to, as you would imagine, bloodborne pathogens, bloodborne pathogens. Understanding, just having a basic level of understanding on things like HIV and AIDS, things like hepatitis. So you just get a basic understanding how to prevent accidental spills in the workplace, how to prevent accidental pinpricks. If there is a spill, basic, like how do you address it? How do you prevent or handle a spill? So that's what the bloodborne pathogen certification is about. Those are the two that you need in step 2. Like I said, that's the first action step. If I were you and I was wanting to do this, I say, hey, this is something I could absolutely do. Maybe I'm doing Uber, DoorDash, Lyft. This would be perfect. I've already got the car. First thing you can do is get your HIPAA and your bloodborne pathogen certification. And I'll leave a link in the bio because I know I could see your wheels spinning. You're saying, well, where do I get those certifications? Well, I'll leave a link and a resource in the description that'll give you a place where you can get your bloodborne pathogen and your HIPAA certification. Also leave a link to a bundle that has a lot of other resources for you if this is something you want to do, to include some places to apply, which takes us to step 3. Step 3 is apply, right? So this is a natural step, right? An obvious step, almost like the first step, where we said, you got to figure out if this is something you can even do. Are you eligible, right? Are you eligible? So step 3 is an obvious one, just like the first one, where you just have to start applying. So I'll write that down. So then, hold on. So step 3 is we're going to apply. Okay. Apply. And there's tons and tons and tons of companies out there that you can apply to. But again, I'll leave a link in the description for a wonderful resource as a bonus. If you get your HIPAA and your bloodborne pathogen certification, you'll kind of have access to some of these things. But there's some companies out there. I can kind of share my screen, but like this one, I'll give you. Lab Logistics is a great company. I've done a ton of business with them over the years. Great company. Doesn't matter what state you're in. They're a national company. Lab Logistics is one that I like. Let's think of some other ones. SDSRX is another one. You see that? It pops right up when you search for that. But SDSRX is one. Just want to kind of throw a couple of these out there for you. Another thing that I like to do, I'll tell you, when you're looking for these jobs right out the gate, and anybody can do this one, but just go to Google, literally just go to Google and type in medical courier jobs near me, right? Notice you don't have to put your city in, because what happens is, when you do this, your IP address is going to come up. So Google's smart enough to know where you are, which is a great thing. So just type in medical courier jobs near me on Google. And then this is I'll kind of give you a preview. Now, I happen to be in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I don't know where you're watching, but you may or may not be in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Yours will look different, obviously, but you can kind of see here what happens. So you see courier, medical courier, full-time second shift. And we'll just kind of glance real quick. Like I said, this is my city. You could just see, and here's one here. You see this one, 600 to 1,200 a week. I'm not sure how well you can see that on the screen. But that's step 3, right? So those are the steps. I really wanted to make this very digestible for you. And if we need to do some follow-up videos, why don't you leave a comment telling me exactly specifically what you want me to go further into, and we could talk about all the nuances. because there are different nuances, but this video was specifically meant to introduce this to you if this is something you never heard before. Maybe you've heard of being a medical courier and you just kind of wanted to know briefly the 3 steps. So that's really what this video was designed for. But again, check out the link in the description. Again, it's a bundle. I'll leave a resource to get your HIPAA, your bloodborne pathogen certification. It'll also have some bonuses in there in that bundle if you get it. It has a list of 75 apps and websites. So I think that's the biggest benefit to most people when they're getting started is they say, hey, where do I go? Where do I go to these jobs? So that comes as a bonus in that resource if you enroll. So take advantage of that. But I'm Alton Orell, your favorite side hustle guy. Like, comment, follow. Come on the journey. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of content specifically on becoming a medical courier. I can speak about this stuff all day. I started a medical courier business over 5 years ago and have been blessed to kind of do over $200,000 a year with my medical courier business for the last 2 years. So we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it. So like, follow, and I'll see you in the next video.